Hello. Welcome, Wedding Cake Business Group people. I said that I would do a video for you on buttercream, straight edge buttercream. And so I've just got this, I've got a 2-tier semi-naked cake to go out tomorrow. And so I'm showing you the top tier, how I make the top edge nice and straight. You'll have to excuse the noise. My daughter has just arrived with her puppy. So there we go. But anyway, so first thing to say, oops, there we go, is I've made the buttercream in this bowl here. But what I always do is dollop into another bowl because obviously I'm going to be on the cake and that is the only bowl that might get crumbs in it. I don't want crumbs to get in that one because if I have enough left over, I'll freeze it. And obviously I don't want to get crumbs in it if I freeze it. So anything that goes on the cake doesn't go in that bowl, it goes in that bowl. Okay, so let's just get that one out of the way. The other thing to know, once I put it in there, I don't know if you can see that, I paddle it to get as many air bubbles out as possible. When I make my buttercream, I whisk it, paddle it in the mixer for ages and ages and ages. It's how it becomes a little bit whiter and it becomes nice and soft and floofy. But if you are obviously wanting to cover a cake in buttercream, you don't want lots of air holes in it or air bubbles in it. So paddle it down. Okay, even more important if it's a fully covered buttercream cake. The one I'm doing today is semi-naked, so it's not that vital. All the bubbles are out, but it's just good to get a lot of them out. So what we're going to actually do, in fact there's a few crumbs in there from before, but that doesn't matter at all for this. So what we're actually going to do, oh, you see that enough, there we go, is we're going to do it upside down, and that's how you get a lovely straight top edge. So what I'm going to do is put some buttercream on here, then put the cake on top, and that will actually be the top, because once it's chilled I'm going to flip it over to get the straight edge. So that is how we get a straight edge. So the first thing I'm going to do, use my bigger palette knife, I am going to, oops, put the top layer of buttercream on here. So, oops, I'll just take a bit of finger sort of, because otherwise it does sort of tend to screw up if you're not careful. Oops, like that. Just have patience with it. And obviously you want the buttercream on here to be slightly bigger, or probably about an inch all around bigger than the cake. Then you can be guaranteed that you get a lovely straight edge there. Doesn't matter that it's not completely flat on here because the cake's going to go on here. What matters more is that you've got rid of any air bubbles out of it so that your top is then going to be nice and flat. Okay. So I've already cut the cake. My hands are very washed and clean, so don't worry about that. So it's a lemon and blueberry, by the way, that's why you've got those in there. So what's actually going to be the top tier goes on first. And then we are going to put some more buttercream in here. Put our first layer on here. It's a little bit more, hang on, let's just dollop from the big pot. And paddle. The paddling doesn't matter so much for the insides, although you don't get too airy inside, do you? Because makes it slightly less stable if you're not careful. I just want a little bit more on there, just a little bit. Never put too much buttercream in the layers, because that's what can lead it to sagging and all that kind of stuff, which we don't want. And the top, that next layer. Now, because this is a buttercream naked cake, I'm not going to be trimming the edges. If it was a fondant cake, I would. But as it is just a buttercream naked cake, I'm not going to. What I am going to do though is just check that it is level. Oh, look at that. You see that? That's perfect, that. Oh, there he is. So that's that one. Next one. Hang on. I'm desperately trying to keep him quiet. It's quite funny. He's a little dash hound and he's gorgeous. He's only a few months. He's about 7-8 months old now. And he comes and scares our cats and has a lovely time. Right. A bit more. Let's do a little bit more. There we go. For this, it doesn't matter if it pokes out the edge because it's going to be semi-naked anyway. If it was a fondant cake, I would scrape that round and have it smoother. Although I'd be crumb coating it anyway, so I don't quite know why I said that. Anyway, right, so next layer is going to flip that way. Double check it's okay all the way around. Yeah. Let's double check the levels. Ooh. Do it that way up. Doesn't really matter with the spirit, I don't know which way up it is, but there we go. Yeah, that will do us. And then the last layer. Looks like I'm going to have some left over, because I don't think I'll need too much, as it's only a semi-naked. I won't need too much on the outside. But there we go for that one. And then that is on the top. Annoyingly, all the blueberries, I usually am quite good at spreading them out, but somehow today they've managed all to sink to the bottom. Never mind. That will do us. Right, let's carefully take that off. There we are. Oh, pull it slightly. Oop. There we are. Righty-ho, a bit more buttercream in here. Should do us. Right, this is where we do need to get a few more bubbles. So let's paddle that right out. It's as smooth as we can get it. And then what we're going to do, let me see that. Is we are going to just gorgeously load it on. I love this bit, it's so satisfying, isn't it? Now, the reason I'm not putting too much on the bottom, I will put a scraping on the bottom actually, is that actually that's on the top rather, that is actually going to be the bottom when we flipped it over. So I'm not really worried about what's going on there, particularly. It's gone a little bit fragile. fragile here. I don't know what it's done here. I think it's because the berry is too near the edge. What I usually do when I make my mixes is I don't add the berries. So if it's raspberries or blueberries or whatever it is, I don't add them to the mix before I put them in the tin. I'll put the batter in the tin and then I'll just put the fruit in the centre and mix it into the centre. But obviously one blueberry here has decided to escape, make its way to the edge. Because what you don't want, particularly if you've got a semi-naked cake, you don't want lots of fruit on the outside because it does spoil the look of it, apart from anything else. It makes it slightly less stable as well. But obviously for this cake, that jolly old blueberry made a break for it. So all I'm going to do on the bottom is just put a scraping, but I'm not going to worry too much about that because that is going to be that's not going to be seen. Right, then we have our scraper. Then what we're going to do is, I hope you can see this. What I do with my scraper is I pull it all the way around like that. Now, can you see what it's doing to the bottom here? Can you see that? I'm scraping that off and it's giving me a lovely edge there. Okay, now because of the uneven sort of the wobbly in and outiness of the cakes, we do have, I can't speak properly today, some gaps. So what I do is put a bit more cream on here. It will become a semi-naked, it's just you have to put loads on and take it off. Because we don't want that sort of stuff. We don't want map of the world going on. We want it smoother than that. And with these, because I haven't trimmed it, I don't want to trim it because it will go too crummy. The top and the bottom stick out, and it sort of dips in a little bit the way that the cake is baked. So, right. So the top and the bottom is going to be quite very naked, if that makes sense, and then the middle is going to have a little bit more icing, a little bit more buttercream, because of the sort of the dip in. But that's not a problem at all. You tend, when you're doing these cakes, you end up with lots of scrapings. So that's why you have a different bowl, you see, because this has got loads of crumbs in it, so you've got loads of crumbs in here, whereas this one, the original bowl, still has uncrumbed buttercream, which I can then freeze and use again. The stuff that's got crumbs in, if you don't use it for the rest of your cake, you can do cake pops or cakesicles with it, and your leftover sponge. Now the top, I'm just going to pull across, but bearing in mind that this is actually going to be the bottom. I had a little bit of a lumpy icing sugar here. Usually my icing sugar, I don't generally sift it unless I'm piping it. I do if I'm piping it. But there's a few sort of little lumps of it today. Anyway, so there we go. So we've scraped around the bottom. Hopefully you can see. Now, what you need to do now is chill it. Chill it for as long as you can, so that the bottom, in fact, and the sides are really solid. Okay. I try, if I can, to leave it there for at least half an hour, if I can, because then I know that it's really solid when it comes out. Because you don't want to be turning it over and peeling this off if it's still tacky, because it will just pull the buttercream up. So it's got to be really, really, really cold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the fridge, and then the next bit I will show you, there'll be a time lapse, there'll be a Scooby-Doo moment where a bit of time will elapse, and then I will show you turning it over and the straight edge on the top. Okay. Right, what I have here is actually the lower tier, the bottom tier. This is a 10-inch. And what I've done, just to start off with, is just put some unchilled buttercream on the top. Let's put a little bit more on there so that it will stick to the, what's it called? Cake drum. There we go. Now, if this was a fully buttercream cake, so a covered cake, I would then do at least one more layer like this way up, if not two. But because this is semi-naked, this is all I need. But say if you're building it up and want a fully covered buttercream cake, you would just carry on like this before turning it, that I'm about to do. Okay, so here is my cake board. I haven't covered this one because this is going to have fruit on it. This is going to have fruit around the bottom. So I don't want to be putting sugar paste on it because it will just go soggy and horrible. But obviously if you wanted to cover your board with fondant, if you do that, or you can do the strip method. So once you put your cake on, you can then put fondant around the bottom if you want to. Say I'm putting fruit on it, so I'm not going to cover it. So the only thing you do need to be careful with when you do it this way is to get it in the centre, and I'm rubbish at getting it in the centre. So we put it on, and we have to sort of just double check that it is. I think that's, I'm not going to press it down too hard in case I need to move it. So we've put what is actually the cake drum it's sitting on the bottom. What we then do is we take the whole thing and we flip it over. Okay, if you're doing that with a 12-inch cake, you just need strong arms because a 12-inch cake is really very heavy. So then we take off that it was sitting on. And as hopefully you can see, if you're careful, and you see it's cold enough for it to be quite solid. Could have actually done with a little bit more because it's slightly tacky on the top here. But as the top tier is going to go on the top, I'm not too worried about that. So can you see then? Really, really lovely sharp edge. Beautiful. What I would do here, I'm not going to do it now, but piping bag, bit of buttercream, squidge it around the bottom, and then use the scraper again to just scrape that in. And then that is good to go. What I'm now going to do is dowel this and then do the same with the top layer. So can you see that? How you get that lovely sharp layer. There we go. Hope that's all right.